Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. I hope that you're doing well. Sagalong 2023 is coming to a close, and with it, we have the ending of the Saga of Hrolf Kraki with a pair of pitched battles. Nearly every loose thread is tied up. We have some interesting characterization here, and that final battle is just absolutely fantastic. But we begin with King Hrolf going north with his handful of champions into Sweden to face off with King Adol's, who has married King Hrolf's mother, Queen Yrsa. And there are some interesting aspects of that battle. There's something supernatural about the way that King Adol's is almost this like gigantic, ogre sitting on the throne as they make their way closer and closer and closer. We have, in a sense, a very real dungeon crawl going on as King Hrolf and his men have to fight their way forward. And it's interesting to see how their number had been diminished in the previous week's reading from a series of tests. And now those tests almost seem to come back again. So we have the test where men were sent home who couldn't handle sitting in the great heat of the fire. Well, here now, the King Adol's men heap up this massive fire with the idea that they're going to reveal the king based on whoever can't sit, and handle the heat. And so there's that parallel. There's a parallel about men and where they've been able to sleep. Here we see the group of champions aren't really able to sleep until Queen Yrsa gives them safety and gives them safe rooms to sleep in. And so there are these interesting little parallels in terms of how that number had been diminished and now how those are tests that the men actually continue to perform. We also have some interesting aspects around the way that deceit is made open within the saga, that they know King Ados is probably going to betray them. And so Svipdag, says, well, I'm going to do all the talking and keep King Hrolf hidden among the champions so they don't know who to come after. They don't know who to kill. They would have to take all of us on. And that's something that they maybe won't be able to do. And so we have some really interesting aspects in that. There is something that feels almost like a series of religious ordeals that they're going through, and these tests that they're going through within that sequence. On their way back, we also have this interesting aspect where King Hrolf's generosity has been mentioned over and over throughout the saga, and now we know why. It's how he escapes. So as they're fleeing from this army that gathers, having broken their way out of a fire, a burning hall, a la Njal's saga, they've broken their way out, they're fighting their way through. As they're riding south back to Denmark, they start to drop these rings back on the road, and that gets the men chasing them to stop and stoop to get the rings, including the ring that's name means like pig of the Swedes. And when they toss it out, the King Ados tries to stab it with his spear, and that's when Hrolf returns and cuts him down to size, in a sense. They talk about King Hrolf being really tall and slender like a pole, and it's interesting that when King Adolf goes, who has been described as this like almost monstrously large, when he goes to get the ring, King Hrolf is essentially cutting him down, almost forming him to make him look more like King Hrolf. And so there might be some interesting parallel there. After that massive, dungeon crawl chase sequence, they then burn back into that farmer Hrani, who says, hey, everything turned out the way I suggested it would. And he offers them these like old crummy weapons and armor and shield, and King Hrolf's like, absolutely not, we're good. And Hrani gets very angry and sort of just takes off. And afterwards they start to realize, wait a second, that was Odin, wasn't it? It's obvious that, there's almost this sense of there's a little cloud over them, and then afterwards they realize what happened. They try to go back. They returned on their way, and nothing is told of their journey until they returned to their kingdom in Denmark. There they settled in quietly. Bodvar advised the king that he should take little part in battles from then on. To Bodvar it seemed likely that they would not be attacked if they remained quiet. He said that he was fearful that the king might not be victorious from then on. If he trusted his luck in battle, King Hrolf answered, fate rules each man's life, and not that foul spirit. Bodvar replied, if it were up to us, we would choose least of all to part with you. I suspect, however, that it is but a short time before momentous events affect us all. With this, they ceased their talk. From this journey, they gained much renown. And there's this sense that we're starting to see this junction of cultures here, where there continue to be characters who hold to the old Norse or old Germanic beliefs in Odin, in Freyr, with the symbols of the great boar that are involved. And so there's that aspect, but we don't see a lot of explicit worship from King Hrolf and his men. We're told at a later point that they trust in their own might and main. And that is something that pops up in sagas periodically, but it's not very common. Usually we have sagas that are either fairly clearly like post-Christian conversion sagas, or we have stories from before that period. But this one is sort of at this interesting juncture where there's a sort of agenda from whoever's writing it down of periodically making note that Odin's an evil spirit and a demon, and not having him be worshipped by King Hrolf and his men. And so that's just something worth noting. But now we approach the final great battle with Skuld, who we can recall was King Hrolf's sister. And she had her mother had been the elf who had appeared and spent, just the one night there, and we see sort of what's happening that we were promised. If she was claimed, then good things would happen, but if not, all these bad things would happen. And that now is coming to fruition because she has married King Hjorvard and says, we don't need to continue paying tribute. We're gonna fight him. And so they gather up, and there's at Yule, there's this big feast going on. And so slowly, for 3 years, Skuld and Hjorvard have been gathering up mercenaries and paying off for troops and such. And they approach the little hall where King Hrolf and his champions are. And there's this sense that King Hrolf's champions are a little bit older now. He himself is a little bit older. And so the battle begins. And it's very quick. It's almost immediate. Like the battle begins. There's a shift in the saga because there are these long speeches, many of them coming from Hjalti, and it's curious that there's this weird interpolation where Hjalti basically asks his mistress, is it better to be married to one old man or two young men? And she prefers the younger men, and he then assaults her and mutilates her horribly. And there's a sense that that's a reflection of her choosing his age, the 1 and 2 suggesting that there would be multiple men who would try to possess her after they murder Hjalti and all the rest of, and the violence that goes towards women when there is a village or hall that has been sacked. But it's unclear what's really going on there. It's curious as well that Hjalti does that and then becomes the spokesman with all these long speeches across the battle. But the battle itself is absolutely incredible. Hrolf and his men ride out, they fight out, and they're just fighting, and there's descriptions of what's going on. And there's this fantastic bit. Hjalti the Magnanimous said, many mail coats are now slit open and many weapons are broken. Helmets are smashed and brave knights are thrown from their mounts. Our king is in fine humor, for now he is as cheerful as when drinking deepest of his ale. He strikes alike with both hands, and in battle he is unlike other kings. To me he seems to have the strength of 12 men. So many brave men has he killed. Now King Hjorvard can see the sword Skofnung cuts. It rings loudly within their skulls. The nature of Skofnung was such that it sang aloud when it struck bone. The battle now became so fierce that nothing could withstand King Hrolf and his champions. Skofnung in hand, King Hrolf fought in a way that seemed a marvel. His courage made a great impression on King Hjorvard's army, whose men fell in heaps. Hjorvard and his men saw a great bear advancing in front of King Hrolf's troop. The bear was always beside the king, and it killed more men with its paw than any 5 of the king's champions did. Blows and missiles glanced off the animal as it used its weight to crush King Hjorvard's men and their horses. Between its teeth, it tore everything within reach, causing a palpable fear to spread through the ranks of King Hjorvard's army. And so we have a true berserker, a champion who has taken the shape of a bear and is now fighting beside the king and is the truest champion of the king. Although it's interesting to note that King Hrolf, despite being belittled and considered not a champion by various characters throughout the saga, clearly demonstrates in a couple of moments that he is just as brave. He does fight just as well in a sense as his champions. But we have this bear. Hjalti is confused because he's looking around for his companion Bodvar and does not see him. So he goes in and finds Bodvar essentially resting in the tent, and he goes and shakes him. Hey, you got to get out here. And Bodvar tells him, you've wrecked it. We had nearly won the battle, and now I don't think you've been as much help to the king as you thought you had. And of course, now that Bodvar comes out to fight as the strongest of the champions and the one that they need, the bear is nowhere to be seen. And now the magic of Skuld comes out. Queen Skuld, from where she sat in her black tent in her witch's scaffold, had been unable to work any magic while the bear was in King Hrolf's ranks. The situation then changed as much as when dark night follows a bright day. King Hrolf's men now saw a hideous boar advancing from King Hjorvard's force. In size, it appeared to be no smaller than a 3-year-old bull. Its color was wolf gray. An arrow shot out from each of its bristles, and in a monstrous way it mowed down King Hrolf's retainers in droves. Hewing with both hands, Bodvar Bjarki moved forcefully around. He thought of nothing else but to cause as much damage as possible before he fell. Men fell dead across each other in front of him until both his shoulders were covered with blood. Corpses were heaped high all around him, and he behaved as though overcome with madness. And it seems as though there's no effect on them. And Hjalti mentions that they'll go to Valhalla. And Bodvar shares that a short while ago in the earlier clash I was up against King Hjorvard, we were face to face and neither of us threw insults at the other, although we exchanged blows for a long time. He gave me a blow that I found heavy, while I, for my part, hacked off a hand and a foot. I landed another blow on his shoulder, slicing him down his side for the length of his spine. His reaction was not even to sigh. It was as if he dozed for a time and I thought him dead. Few men like him are to be found. I do not recognize Odin among them. And he's trying to find like where this Hrani character is so he can kill him. But Hjalti replies, it is not possible to bend fate, nor can one stand against nature. And there's this sense that they sort of accept the fate that they will all, die here, that they will go to Valhalla, despite the fact that they've been trusting in their might and main. And so having had everyone sort of fall about, this storm of enchantments falls upon them, and King Hrolf is sort of the last one standing, and he ultimately falls. But we're told a couple of things. One is that his brother Elkfrodi, and joined by their other brother King Thorir, do come, and Elkfrodi takes vengeance. He ends up killing Skuld, sort of taking back the land. There's a small army that Vag, who had promised to, be faithful and avenge Hrolf back in King Adolf's hall and had received a little gold ring from him. He comes with an army from Sweden to help. And so there's this sense that, all of those threads do come back. The people who claim they would take vengeance claim vengeance, whether it's against Hrolf or on his behalf. And it's curious the way the saga ends, because here ends the saga of King Hrolf Kraki and his champions. It's very clear that throughout this, Hrolf has been a key character, but he's not the only character, and that there are personages that the saga writer felt were very critical. Bodvar, Svitdag, Hjalti. So many people like seemed to be important, and so that's another aspect of the saga that I really enjoyed. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're doing well. Thanks.